Night settles differently along the forest edge. Heat lingers close to the ground, humidity thickens the air, and the boundary between wild and familiar dissolves into a single, active zone. Insects gather around lights. Frogs emerge from cover. Paths, yards, riverbanks, and roadsides become shared spaces where animals that evolved deep in ecosystems now move through human-modified terrain with ease. The marine toad belongs perfectly to this overlap. Large, slow, unhurried, it does not hide its presence. It does not need to. Its body is built for tolerance. Thick skin resists dehydration. Powerful lungs support long periods of inactivity. Broad parotoid glands swell behind the eyes like armored reservoirs, silently advertising that this animal is not meant to be eaten or handled casually. In the rainforest, these traits deter predators that learn quickly. At the forest edge, they collide with curiosity, pets, and human habits that assume danger must bite, sting, or chase to matter. The toad does none of those things. It waits. The danger does not begin with contact alone. It begins with what follows. The marine toad's toxins are not injected through fangs or spines. They sit on the skin, embedded in a milky secretion that coats the body as a defensive shield. When threatened, stressed, or squeezed, the toad releases more of it, spreading cardiotoxic and neuroactive compounds across its surface. Touching the animal transfers those compounds easily. The skin does not need to break. The toxin does not need to be tasted. It only needs a pathway. Hands provide that pathway. The contamination trap is deceptively simple. Someone picks up the toad to move it from a path, to inspect it, to protect a pet, or out of misplaced confidence that amphibians are harmless. The skin feels dry, bumpy, almost rubbery. There is no sting, no burn, no immediate feedback that anything is wrong. Minutes later, the same hands wipe sweat from a brow, rub tired eyes, adjust a mouthguard, handle food, or steady a child. The delivery system activates quietly, efficiently, without intention. Once toxins enter through mucous membranes, eyes, mouth, nose, or small breaks in the skin, the body reacts quickly. Nausea is often the first signal, sudden and overwhelming, as if the digestive system has received an alarm it cannot interpret. Salivation increases. The stomach tightens. Vomiting may follow, not as a cleansing reflex, but as a sign that autonomic control is already slipping. This is not food poisoning. It is systemic disruption. Marine toad toxins interfere with cellular ion balance, particularly in cardiac and nervous tissue. These compounds evolved to stop predators decisively, not by causing pain, but by destabilizing vital rhythms. The heart becomes especially vulnerable. Beats may feel irregular, forceful, or oddly weak. Blood pressure fluctuates. Dizziness sets in as circulation struggles to maintain equilibrium. Muscles lose reliability, not through cramping or paralysis, but through fatigue that arrives too fast and too deeply to explain by exertion alone. This is the blackout the toad creates, not loss of consciousness, but loss of performance. The body is awake, responsive, and yet profoundly compromised. Standing feels harder than it should. Vision may blur or narrow as blood flow regulation falters. Concentration slips. Coordination becomes unreliable. The systems that usually run invisibly in the background, heartbeat, digestion, balance, begin demanding attention all at once. Pets experience this even more severely. Dogs, in particular, investigate with their mouths. A single bite or lick delivers toxin directly onto highly absorbent tissue. The response is immediate and dramatic: drooling, pawing at the mouth, disorientation, collapse. In the wild, this teaches predators a lesson they survive only once. In human environments, it becomes an emergency that unfolds in minutes. What makes marine toad exposure dangerous is not just the chemistry, but the false sense of control. There is no violent encounter to mark the moment of risk. The animal does not chase or strike. The person involved often believes the interaction is over as soon as the toad is set down. The delay between contact and consequence erases urgency, allowing toxins time to spread before protective measures are taken. In remote or tropical environments, this delay compounds rapidly. Heat accelerates circulation. Dehydration concentrates toxins in the bloodstream. Physical activity increases absorption. Medical help may be distant, and symptoms that begin as nausea and weakness can escalate into serious cardiac stress without intervention. What could be manageable under observation becomes unstable when the body is pushed to compensate alone. Ecologically, the marine toad strategy is brutally effective. It does not rely on speed, stealth, or aggression. It relies on inevitability. Predators that attempt to eat it pay immediately. Those that mouth it and release it still learn the lesson. The toad survives because its toxin enforces boundaries long after contact ends. In environments where many predators hunt by trial and error, this chemical certainty ensures survival. The irony is that humans bypass those lessons by removing context. We handle what we do not intend to eat. We touch and then forget. We trust our skin as a barrier without respecting how often we breach it ourselves. The toad's defense assumes predators learn quickly. Humans outsource learning to rules and habits, and those habits fail easily at night, in heat, under distraction. The Amazon and its tropical margins amplify this risk. Sweat runs constantly. Eyes itch from insects and humidity. Water is consumed frequently. Hands are always in motion, bridging the gap between environment and body. In this setting, contamination spreads not through aggression, but through routine. The toxin does not need force. It needs repetition. Understanding the marine toad requires discarding the idea that danger must look dramatic. This animal is a walking boundary marker, a chemical signpost declaring that some organisms defend themselves not at the moment of attack, but afterward when attention fades. Its toxins are not a weapon of pursuit. They are a punishment for carelessness, delivered by the victim's own behavior. The lesson here is not fear of the animal, but respect for the interface. The skin is not just a surface, it is a transfer point. Hands are not neutral tools, they are vectors. In ecosystems where toxins replace teeth and speed, survival depends on understanding how easily the body becomes its own worst enemy. The marine toad remains still as chaos unfolds elsewhere. Insects continue to swarm. The night continues its rhythm. The toad's role is complete the moment contact is made. What follows is not an attack, but a systems failure triggered by assumption. And in environments where help is distant and conditions are unforgiving, that failure can escalate with terrifying speed. The blackout is not sudden. It creeps in through nausea, weakness and strain, through a heart forced to work under chemical interference. By the time the danger is recognized, the delivery system has already done its job. The hands have spoken for the toxin. The body is left to deal with the consequences. The rainforest rewards attention, but it punishes certainty. Many of its most consequential animals do not dominate the frame. They sit at the edge of perception, angular, still, disguised as debris or bark, waiting for contact that feels accidental rather than confrontational. The assassin bug lives in that narrow margin. It does not chase large animals. It does not need to. Its danger lies in proximity, in the brief intersection between skin and an insect that evolved to turn living tissue into liquid. On the forest floor, assassin bugs blend seamlessly into their surroundings. Some wear camouflage of dust and debris, coating their own bodies to dissolve into leaf litter. Others perch on vegetation at night, motionless, their silhouettes broken by shadows and irregular angles. Their hunting strategy depends on patience and precision. When prey brushes close, the proboscis, a rigid, needle-like mouthpart, drives forward, delivering saliva that paralyzes, dissolves, and kills. This same mechanism, scaled up against human skin, produces a very different story. The bite is immediate and unmistakable. It does not itch. It does not sting mildly. It feels like a nail driven sharply into flesh, a sudden, focused pain that demands full attention. The proboscis punctures skin with force, injecting enzymes designed to break down tissue from the inside. Swelling follows quickly, not dramatic at first, but tight and intrusive. The area reddens, heats, and begins to throb with a pulse that syncs uncomfortably with the heartbeat. This kind of pain is disruptive in a way that cuts and scrapes are not. It pulls focus inward. Coordination suffers because the nervous system is forced to prioritize the injured site. Hands hesitate. Steps shorten. Balance adjusts subtly, often without awareness. In dense terrain, even a momentary lapse in rhythm can create risk. A misjudged foothold, a delayed grip, a stumble corrected too late. Assassin bugs are not venomous in the classic sense, but their saliva is chemically aggressive. It contains compounds that interfere with nerve signaling locally, amplifying pain while breaking down cells. The body responds with inflammation, flooding the area with immune activity. This response is protective, but it also magnifies swelling and discomfort, prolonging the functional impairment long after the insect has disengaged. From an ecological perspective, this makes sense. Assassin bugs often hunt prey larger than themselves: caterpillars, beetles, even other predators. They cannot afford prolonged struggle. Their bite must neutralize quickly and decisively. Pain is not collateral damage. It is part of the system, ensuring that prey stops resisting almost instantly. For humans, this creates the first layer of the blackout, not total failure, but compromised attention. Pain narrows perception. It hijacks decision-making. In the rainforest, where navigation depends on continuous assessment, routes, slopes, water levels, canopy cover, this narrowing can be dangerous. The body is still functional, but it is no longer operating with full situational awareness. Yet, the assassin bug story does not always end with the bite. Some species within this broad group are associated with parasites that add a delayed dimension to the encounter. This is not an automatic outcome, and it does not follow every bite. But the ecological relationship exists, and understanding it adds depth to the risk landscape. Certain assassin bugs can act as vectors, carrying microscopic organisms that enter the body through broken skin or mucous membranes. These organisms do not announce themselves immediately. They do not cause instant collapse. They wait. This delayed phase is what makes the assassin bug different from animals whose danger peaks at the moment of contact. Here, the blackout may arrive later, separated from the original event by days, weeks, or even longer. Fatigue sets in without clear cause. Weakness lingers. The body feels slower, less resilient. Heart rhythm, digestion, or neurological function may begin to deviate subtly from normal. The connection to a single bite, long healed, is easy to miss. Importantly, this is not a medical lecture scenario. It is an ecological one. Parasites thrive on invisibility. Their success depends on hosts moving on, continuing life without associating delayed dysfunction with an earlier exposure. In the forest, where insect bites are constant and often ignored, this invisibility is amplified. The assassin bug becomes part of a larger system where immediate danger teaches caution, but delayed consequences test memory and awareness. From the insect's perspective, none of this is intentional. The assassin bug does not target humans. It reacts defensively when pressed or mishandled, delivering the same bite it would use on prey. The parasite, if present, exploits opportunity, not strategy. What emerges is a layered risk, acute disruption followed by potential aftershock that mirrors the complexity of the ecosystem itself. This layered danger matters because it challenges how humans categorize threats. We are conditioned to rank animals by immediacy, what can kill now versus what cannot. The assassin bug does not fit neatly into that hierarchy. Its bite is rarely fatal. Its pain is intense but localized. Its true impact lies in how it destabilizes both the moment and the future, forcing attention away from the environment now and, potentially, health later. In remote rainforest conditions, delayed consequences carry extra weight. Medical infrastructure is distant. Baseline fatigue from heat, humidity, and exertion masks early warning signs. When systems begin to fail quietly, reduced stamina, irregular heartbeat sensations, persistent weakness, they are often attributed to environment rather than exposure. The blackout is not dramatic enough to demand evacuation until it has already deepened. The assassin bug thus adds a different rhythm to the narrative of danger. Not everything unfolds in seconds. Some threats write themselves slowly into the body, using time as their advantage. This mirrors broader ecological processes, where outcomes are shaped not by single events, but by accumulation, small disruptions layered until resilience gives way. There is also a behavioral lesson embedded here. Assassin bugs are most often encountered when people rest, lean, or settle. Hands placed on logs, backs against trees, clothing dropped on the ground overnight. These are moments when vigilance drops, when the body assumes safety because movement has paused. The insect exploits stillness not by attack, but by being there first. The forest does not distinguish between immediate and delayed harm. It only responds to function. A person distracted by pain moves differently. A person weakened weeks later plans differently. Routes change. Decisions shorten. Margins shrink. The assassin bug's influence, direct or indirect, ripples outward into behavior long after the insect itself is forgotten. This is why this chapter matters. It complicates the idea of blackout. Loss of function does not always coincide with contact. Sometimes it arrives later, disguised as something else, untethered from the original moment. In ecosystems built on layered interactions, that delay is not an anomaly. It is the rule. The assassin bug remains what it has always been: a precision predator, an efficient converter of biology into advantage. It does not need size, speed, or spectacle. It relies on chemistry, timing, and proximity. For humans, the danger lies not in fear of the insect, but in underestimating the reach of its effects. The forest is full of creatures that punish mistakes immediately. The assassin bug belongs to a quieter category, those that let you walk away before the consequences finish unfolding. In that space between now and later, between pain and realization, lies a different kind of blackout. One that reminds us that in complex ecosystems, the most serious threats are not always the ones that stop you on the spot, but the ones that follow you out of the frame. In the rainforest, danger does not always announce itself with teeth or speed. Sometimes it waits at eye level, no larger than a thumb, glowing against the green like a dropped ember. Poison dart frogs do not hide. Their colors, electric blues, sulfur yellows, blood reds, are not camouflage, but declaration. In an ecosystem where visual language matters, these animals speak plainly: do not touch. The forest understands this immediately. Humans, often distracted by beauty or novelty, are slower to translate the message. The frog sits on a wet leaf, unmoving, its skin slick with moisture. Rain beads cling to its back, sliding across a surface that looks smooth but is chemically complex. This is not a creature that bites or stings. It does not chase, lunge, or threaten. The danger begins not with aggression, but with assumption. The assumption that contact is harmless if no wound is visible, that danger requires penetration, that poison must be injected to matter. Poison dart frogs dismantle all of that logic. Their toxins are not produced by the frogs themselves, but accumulated through diet: ants, mites, beetles rich in alkaloids. Over time, these compounds concentrate in the frog's skin, turning its entire surface into a delivery medium. This strategy is ecological elegance at its peak. The frog does not need fangs. It does not need venom glands. It becomes untouchable by becoming chemically incompatible with life. In the rainforest, hands are never dry. Skin is softened by humidity, pores open, sweat constant. Small cuts are unavoidable: thorns, insect bites, abrasions from bark or stone. These micro-injuries are often unnoticed, but biologically significant. They turn the skin from barrier to gateway. When wet hands make contact with a poison dart frog, toxins transfer easily, dissolving into moisture, spreading across fingers and palms. The frog remains still. The mistake has already happened. The crisis does not always begin at the point of contact. It begins seconds or minutes later, when those same hands do what hands always do in the forest. They brush hair from the forehead. They wipe sweat from the eyes. They scratch an itch. They adjust a strap. The face becomes the next surface, and mucous membranes, eyes, lips, nostrils, absorb compounds far more efficiently than intact skin ever could. This is not a bite. It is a chain reaction. Once toxins reach sensitive tissue, the body responds violently. Pain can arrive as a sudden, burning intensity that feels disproportionate to the contact that caused it. Vision may blur as eyes flood with tears, not just from irritation, but from neural overload. Dizziness follows quickly, as the nervous system struggles to reconcile conflicting signals. The heart rate spikes, blood pressure shifts, balance falters. The body enters a state of alarm without a clear target to fight or flee from. This is the shutdown poison dart frogs create. Not unconsciousness, but compromised judgment. The brain remains awake, but decision-making degrades as stress hormones flood the system. Panic rises, not as fear of the frog, but as fear of the body's sudden betrayal. Movements become erratic. Choices become impulsive. The ability to assess risk collapses precisely when it is most needed. From an evolutionary perspective, this is the point. The frog's toxins are meant to discourage contact instantly and decisively. Predators that mouth a frog experience overwhelming discomfort and release it immediately. Those that survive remember the colors for life. The toxin does not need to kill. It needs to teach, fast. Humans, however, often encounter these frogs outside that evolutionary script. We are not predators testing prey. We are observers, photographers, collectors of experience. We crouch, reach, steady ourselves on leaves and logs, unaware that the smallest contact can turn observation into exposure. The frog's defense assumes the lesson will be learned once. In remote environments, that first lesson can become a medical emergency. The Amazon amplifies this danger through context. Heat accelerates circulation, spreading toxins faster. Dehydration thickens blood chemistry, intensifying effects. Distance from medical care stretches minutes into hours, hours into days. What might be survivable with immediate intervention becomes unstable when the body must cope alone. Pain and dizziness impair navigation. Panic increases exertion. Exertion accelerates absorption. The spiral tightens. It is important to be precise here. Poison dart frog exposure is not uniformly fatal, and not every species carries the same toxin load. But precision does not equal safety. Even non-lethal doses can incapacitate, especially when delivered to eyes or mouth. The risk is not just toxicity, but timing. Losing coordination or clarity in dense forest, on uneven ground, near rivers or cliffs, multiplies secondary dangers. Falls, drowning, exposure. These are not abstract possibilities. They are the environment waiting for a mistake to compound. The frog does not pursue. It does not escalate. It does not even move. Its entire strategy is front-loaded into prevention. Bright coloration warns. Toxins enforce. The rest is up to the intruder. In this way, poison dart frogs invert the usual predator-prey narrative. The smallest animal controls the largest through chemistry alone. There is a deeper ecological story embedded here. These frogs are indicators of forest health. Their toxins depend on intact food webs. When habitats degrade, toxin levels drop. Predators return. The frogs become vulnerable. In pristine systems, the chemical boundary holds firm. In disrupted ones, it erodes. Human contact with poison dart frogs often signals not wilderness untouched, but edges, places where curiosity and access have breached the natural distance these animals evolved to maintain. Understanding poison dart frogs requires abandoning the idea that danger must be dramatic. There is no attack sequence, no visible struggle. The moment of crisis is private, internal, unfolding through pain, dizziness, and confusion rather than wounds. The frog's power lies in how easily it turns routine behavior into liability. Hands in the rainforest are tools of survival. They climb, carry, build, steady. They also bridge the gap between environment and body constantly. Poison dart frogs exploit that bridge not intentionally, but inevitably. Their toxins are passive until moved. The body does the rest. The lesson here is not fear of color or smallness. It is respect for transfer. In ecosystems built on chemical defense, contact is communication. Every surface matters. Every habit matters. Touching your face is not neutral. Wet skin is not safe. Microcuts are not trivial. The shutdown arrives as a cascade. Pain that demands attention, dizziness that erodes balance, panic that hijacks judgment. By the time the danger is recognized, the toxin has already crossed the threshold. The frog remains where it was, luminous and still, its role complete. The forest continues around it, indifferent to the human system, recalibrating under chemical stress. Poison dart frogs do not need to chase danger away. They let it carry danger forward on its own hands. In that quiet efficiency lies their evolutionary triumph, and a reminder that in the rainforest, the most serious mistakes are often the ones that feel smallest at the moment they're made. The rainforest floor is built to punish hands. Every surface, rotting wood, loose bark, stone slick with algae, demands touch before it reveals stability. Balance is negotiated one grip at a time. Fingers slide under logs. Palms press into soil. Tools are passed, adjusted, caught mid-slip. In this world, hands are not accessories. They are anchors. And that is exactly why the Scolopendra matters. The giant centipede lives where hands go first. Under bark. Inside hollow logs. Beneath stones still warm from the day. It does not build traps or webs. It hunts and defends in tight spaces, using speed and leverage rather than distance. Its body is long, segmented, armored just enough to resist crushing pressure. Dozens of legs move in coordinated waves, gripping surfaces with a precision that feels excessive until you realize the environment demands it. This animal is designed for sudden contact. The encounter is almost always accidental. A log lifted, a rock rolled, a hand placed where darkness looked empty. The centipede does not flee. In confined space, escape routes are limited. Instead, it coils and strikes sideways with its forcipules, modified front legs that function as venom-injecting pincers. The motion is fast, forceful, and close range. There is no warning display meant for humans. The message is delivered directly into tissue. The venom is not meant to kill large animals. It is meant to disable. Proteins and peptides trigger intense localized inflammation, nerve irritation, and pain that spreads outward from the bite site like heat through metal. Almost immediately, swelling begins. Tissue tightens. Blood flow shifts. Fingers lose dexterity as joints stiffen under pressure they cannot relieve. The hand becomes unfamiliar within minutes. This is the local blackout, not unconsciousness, not paralysis. Function loss. Grip strength evaporates as pain overwhelms fine motor control. Fingers curl involuntarily or refuse to close fully. Sensation distorts. Sharp pain laced with deep aching pulses that radiate up the arm. The nervous system does not shut down. It overloads the affected region, drowning useful signals in alarm. From the centipede's perspective, this is ideal. Its predators and competitors are neutralized long enough for escape. The venom turns a threatening limb into dead weight without requiring prolonged engagement. Evolution favors efficiency in tight spaces. A single decisive strike buys time. For humans, the consequences are rarely limited to the bite itself. The rainforest is not forgiving of asymmetry. Losing the use of one hand shifts balance immediately. A person climbing or descending becomes unstable. Tools slip. Machetes drop. Ropes slide. A misstep follows. Falls do not need height to be serious when roots, rocks, and sharp debris line every surface. Pain drives reaction, and reaction drives error. A sudden loss of grip triggers instinctive compensation, reaching with the other hand, twisting the torso, shifting weight too quickly. In dense forest, these movements cascade. Ankles roll, knees strike roots, faces meet bark. Secondary injuries accumulate not because the centipede is lethal, but because the environment is intolerant of imbalance. Swelling continues to build over the first hour. Rings of pressure form around joints. Movement becomes more restricted. The hand may double in size, skin stretched tight and glossy. Heat radiates outward, and the pain deepens into something that feels structural rather than superficial. Hydration status, temperature, and exertion all influence severity. In heat, inflammation accelerates. In dehydration, tissue recovery slows. The forest amplifies the venom's effects by refusing to give the body ideal conditions to respond. What makes Scolopendra encounters dangerous is not unpredictability, but placement. Bites overwhelmingly occur on hands, fingers, and forearms, the exact tools required for survival in uneven terrain. Losing leg function is dramatic. Losing hand function is subtle and often more destabilizing. You can limp carefully. You cannot easily compensate for a hand that refuses to grip. Ecologically, the centipede occupies a critical role as both predator and regulator. It hunts insects, small vertebrates, even other arthropods that might otherwise dominate the forest floor. Its venom reflects that role, fast-acting, localized, designed to prevent struggle rather than induce systemic collapse. The animal does not want to fight. It wants separation. But separation in the rainforest is rarely clean. Distance is earned through movement, and movement requires coordination. When that coordination is compromised, even briefly, risk multiplies. A dropped tool may be unrecoverable. A fall may pin the injured limb further, increasing swelling. Infection becomes a concern as puncture wounds mix with humid conditions and organic debris. Unlike neurotoxins that confuse the entire system, Scolopendra venom teaches a different lesson. Partial failure can be more dangerous than total collapse. A person who can still move, but poorly, continues to attempt tasks they are no longer equipped to perform. They push forward instead of stopping. They underestimate the seriousness because consciousness remains clear. The blackout is localized, not dramatic, and therefore easier to ignore. The centipede does not pursue after the bite. It vanishes into the same darkness it came from, leaving behind a human problem created in seconds, but solved only with time, rest, and careful management. In remote environments, time is not always available. Camps must be reached, rivers crossed, terrain navigated. Each task becomes more hazardous when one hand cannot be trusted. There is a broader ecological truth embedded here. Many rainforest defenses do not aim for death. They aim for compromise. Slowing an enemy, breaking rhythm, creating enough dysfunction that the environment itself becomes the finishing factor. The centipede embodies this strategy perfectly. Its venom does not need to overwhelm the whole body. It only needs to disable the interface between intention and environment. Understanding Scolopendra encounters requires recalibrating how danger is assessed. Pain alone is not the metric. Function is. Grip is survival currency in the rainforest. Lose it, and everything downstream becomes harder, riskier, slower. The centipede's evolutionary success lies in exploiting that dependency with ruthless precision. The forest does not adapt to your injury. Roots do not soften. Slopes do not flatten. Rain does not pause. The centipede knows this. It has evolved not to fight the environment, but to weaponize it indirectly. One bite, one hand compromised, and the margin disappears. The lesson is not fear of the animal, but respect for placement. Hands go first in the rainforest. So do the consequences. The Scolopendra does not need size or spectacle. It only needs proximity. In that narrow space between bark and palm, between grip and slip, it delivers a failure that the environment is more than willing to exploit. The rainforest does not roar its danger all at once. Much of it arrives quietly, distributed through time, riding on cycles so old they feel inevitable. Mosquitoes are the clearest example of this slow violence. They do not overwhelm the senses. They do not announce themselves with size or force. They slip in at dusk, at dawn, in the thin margins of light when heat lingers and air stops moving. Their presence is felt less as an encounter than as an atmosphere, an invisible pressure that settles over the forest and stays. A single bite is trivial, barely noticed. A pinpoint itch lost among dozens of other sensations, sweat dripping into eyes, fabric sticking to skin, muscles tight from hours of movement. The mosquito takes what it needs in seconds, injecting saliva that prevents clotting, slipping away before the body registers intrusion. Nothing about the moment suggests danger. That is precisely why mosquitoes are so effective. Unlike predators that must incapacitate prey immediately, mosquitoes operate on delay. They are not hunters in the traditional sense. They are vectors, bridges between organisms that would never otherwise touch. Their evolutionary success comes from exploiting blood not as food alone, but as transport. Viruses and parasites move through them like stowaways, invisible and patient, waiting for the right internal conditions to emerge. When illness follows, it does not feel connected to the bite. Hours or days later, fatigue creeps in without explanation. Limbs feel heavy. The heat feels sharper, less tolerable. A low fever builds, subtle at first, then insistent. The body diverts energy inward, prioritizing immune response over strength, coordination, and clarity. What begins as tiredness becomes something more corrosive, a systemic slowdown that affects every decision. This is the mosquito's blackout. Not collapse, not pain, impairment. Fever changes how the body moves through space. Muscles weaken not because they are damaged, but because energy is rationed. Reflexes slow. Reaction time stretches. Balance feels slightly off, like standing on a boat that never quite stops rocking. The brain, bathed in inflammatory signals, struggles to maintain focus. Thoughts blur at the edges. Simple choices take longer. Complex ones become error-prone. In controlled environments, this kind of illness is unpleasant but manageable. Rest, fluids, shade, monitoring. In the rainforest, it becomes dangerous because movement does not stop just because the body wants it to. Terrain still needs crossing. Rivers still need fording. Camps still need setting before night closes in. The forest does not pause to accommodate weakness. People often describe this state as moving like they're drunk, and the comparison is precise. Gait becomes uneven. Judgments about distance and footing degrade. Hands miss grips they would normally secure without thought. A foot slips on a route that would have been avoided on any other day. Tools are dropped. Knots are tied poorly. Decisions shorten, favoring immediacy over safety because mental endurance is gone. Heat compounds everything. Fever raises internal temperature, while the environment prevents effective cooling. Sweat pours off the body, accelerating dehydration. Dehydration thickens the blood, stressing circulation and further reducing physical output. The heart works harder to achieve less. Standing becomes exhausting. The simplest incline feels punishing. From an ecological standpoint, mosquitoes thrive in precisely these conditions. Floodplains, stagnant pools, hoofprints filled with rainwater, discarded containers near camps, all become nurseries. Seasonal flooding in the Amazon creates vast breeding grounds, synchronizing mosquito population booms with the very times humans and animals are forced to move more, not less. Wet season travel coincides with peak exposure. Mosquitoes are exquisitely tuned to find hosts under these conditions. They detect carbon dioxide plumes in humid air. They sense body heat and sweat compounds. They exploit moments when clothing is loosened, when skin is exposed to cool off. Their feeding behavior is not random. It is opportunistic in the strictest ecological sense, taking advantage of stress, heat, and movement patterns. The danger lies not in inevitability, but in accumulation. One bite rarely matters. Many bites increase probability. Probability, over time, becomes outcome. When illness sets in, it is not dramatic enough to demand immediate retreat, yet serious enough to erode performance steadily. This is where the mosquito differs fundamentally from more obvious threats. There is no single moment to point to and say, "This is when everything went wrong." Instead, there is a gradual narrowing of margin. Cognitive fog is the most underestimated component. Fever alters neurotransmitter balance and cerebral blood flow. Concentration wavers. Situational awareness fades. In jungle terrain, awareness is survival. Reading weather changes, tracking time before darkness, choosing safe ground for rest, all require mental sharpness. When the mind slows, the environment does not. Mistakes compound. A wrong turn adds distance. Extra distance adds fatigue. Fatigue worsens fever symptoms. The loop tightens quietly. People push on because nothing feels catastrophic yet. That decision, continuing when judgment is impaired, is often the most dangerous one. Mosquito-borne illnesses vary in severity and onset, but the mechanism that matters most here is shared. Systemic weakness paired with cognitive impairment. The body is fighting internally while still being asked to perform externally. This conflict drains reserves faster than exertion alone ever could. In the rainforest, secondary risks multiply under these conditions. A weakened person is slower to react to animals, weather shifts, or terrain changes. They may misjudge water crossings, underestimate current strength, or fail to notice signs of flash flooding upstream. They may forget to hydrate or eat adequately, accelerating decline. What begins as fever becomes a cascade of compromised decisions. From the mosquito's perspective, none of this is malicious. It is simply ecology in motion. The insect feeds, reproduces, and moves on. The pathogens it carries follow their own evolutionary imperatives, exploiting hosts efficiently without regard for landscape. Humans enter this system as large, mobile reservoirs, attractive not because of intent, but because of biology. This chapter matters because it reframes danger away from spectacle. Mosquitoes kill not through violence, but through attrition. They turn time itself into a hazard. The blackout they create is subtle, prolonged, and easy to dismiss until the environment exposes its cost. There is also a psychological trap here. Familiarity breeds contempt. Mosquitoes are everywhere, in cities and villages and backyards. Their presence feels mundane. That familiarity masks how profoundly different the consequences become when medical access disappears and terrain becomes unforgiving. What is an inconvenience in one context is a liability in another. The rainforest does not care why you are slow. It only responds to the fact that you are. Slowness invites risk. Fatigue invites error. Cognitive fog invites overconfidence or hesitation at the wrong moment. The mosquito's influence seeps into behavior long before it becomes a medical diagnosis. Understanding mosquitoes in this context is not about fear. It is about respecting scale. Small organisms can exert large effects when they operate through systems rather than force. Fever is not just a symptom, it is a functional impairment. Weakness is not just discomfort, it is a reduction in survival capacity. Mental fog is not just annoyance, it is degraded threat assessment. The blackout here is not sudden. It unfolds as a quiet subtraction, energy removed, clarity dulled, coordination softened. By the time it is recognized, the body is already negotiating with fewer resources than the environment demands. Mosquitoes do not need to stop you outright. They only need to make you a little worse at everything. In a landscape where precision matters, that is more than enough. The forest does not always test strength. Sometimes it tests control. Along the bases of towering trees, where buttress roots rise like frozen waves and leaf litter piles deep in shadow, bullet ants patrol with deliberate certainty. Their movements are unhurried, almost calm, as if nothing in this world could justify panic. They do not swarm blindly. They do not waste energy. Each ant knows its path, its role, and the ground it defends. In this ecosystem, order is survival, and the bullet ant enforces that order with one of the most extreme pain mechanisms known in the natural world. The sting is not an accident. It is not incidental contact like brushing past nettles or spines. Bullet ants defend territory aggressively and without hesitation. A hand placed against a trunk, a forearm sliding along bark, a foot stepping too close to a trail. These are interpreted instantly as intrusion. The ant does not bluff. It anchors itself, curls its abdomen, and drives the stinger in with commitment. What follows is not just pain. It is neurological disruption expressed through behavior. The venom is not complex in quantity, but it is devastating in effect. Its primary compound targets pain receptors directly, forcing them into prolonged activation. The signal does not fade. It does not adapt. It does not soften with time. Instead, it sustains a maximum intensity alarm that overwhelms the nervous system's ability to filter or prioritize. The brain receives one message and one message only. Something is catastrophically wrong. This is the bullet ant's nerve blackout, not unconsciousness. not paralysis. Control failure. Within seconds, the body begins to shake. Muscles tense and tremble as adrenaline floods the system in a futile attempt to respond. Sweat breaks out instantly, not from heat alone, but from autonomic overload. Fine motor skills vanish first. Fingers lose precision. Grip strength fluctuates unpredictably. The ability to perform deliberate, careful movements dissolves under the weight of raw sensation. Pain at this level is not just a sensory experience. It is a cognitive event. It hijacks attention completely. The mind cannot plan, calculate or assess risk while the nervous system is screaming at full volume. Breathing becomes shallow or erratic. Vision may narrow. Time perception distorts. The body reacts before thought, and those reactions are rarely useful in complex terrain. This matters profoundly in the Amazon. The rainforest is not a place where you can afford sudden, uncontrolled movement. Roots, vines, uneven ground, and sharp debris wait everywhere. A reflexive jerk of the arm can throw off balance. A misstep can turn into a fall. A dropped tool can disappear into mud or water. When control fractures, the environment takes advantage immediately. The bullet ant's venom evolved for this exact outcome. Large predators do not need to die to learn. They only need to lose control long enough to associate the ant with unbearable consequence. Insects that prey on ants are forced to release immediately. Vertebrates that interfere retreat violently, often injuring themselves in the process. The ant does not need to pursue or escalate. The pain does the work. From an ecological perspective, this is efficient beyond measure. Bullet ants invest heavily in defense rather than escape. They are slow compared to many predators, but speed is irrelevant when the cost of contact is intolerable. Their colonies occupy valuable real estate, tree bases, root systems, pathways rich in resources. Pain is how they hold that ground. Humans experience this defense in a uniquely dangerous way. We are not adapted to process pain at this intensity while maintaining coordination. Our nervous systems evolved to treat such signals as existential threats, triggering fight-or-flight responses that assume open space and escape routes. The rainforest offers neither. Panic reactions collide with dense structure. The shaking is not weakness. It is neurological overflow. Motor neurons fire erratically as the brain attempts to reconcile overwhelming input. Muscles clench and release without pattern. The body feels untrustworthy, as if it might collapse or lurch in any direction without warning. Even standing still becomes difficult. The ground seems unstable, not because it is moving, but because perception has lost calibration. This is why the bullet ant's danger cannot be measured by venom toxicity alone. The venom does not destroy tissue. It does not shut down organs. It breaks the interface between intention and action. In the Amazon, that interface is everything. Control is how you step across a slick route without slipping. Control is how you lower yourself down a bank without tumbling. Control is how you keep your footing when the ground gives way slightly beneath you. Lose it, and the margin evaporates. The duration of the pain compounds the problem. This is not a sharp spike that passes quickly. The intensity persists for hours, sometimes longer, keeping the nervous system locked in crisis mode. Even after the initial shock fades slightly, coordination does not return immediately. Movements remain clumsy. Hands remain unreliable. Judgment remains compromised. Fatigue sets in rapidly, as the body burns energy at an unsustainable rate under stress. In traditional cultures, the bullet ant's sting has been used deliberately in rites of passage, not because it kills, but because it tests something deeper: endurance, discipline, the ability to remain still and composed while every instinct demands chaos. That cultural understanding reveals something critical. The sting is a lesson in control under extreme sensory assault. In the rainforest, that lesson is not symbolic. It is practical. The environment does not forgive loss of composure. A person staggering or thrashing in pain is more likely to fall into water, disturb dangerous animals, or suffer secondary injuries that far exceed the sting itself. The ant does not need to be lethal. The cascade does that work. There is a final irony here. Bullet ants are not hidden threats. Their trails are visible. Their size is noticeable. Their presence is often announced by movement and sound if you are paying attention. They punish not ignorance, but inattention. A moment of careless contact triggers consequences wildly disproportionate to the ant's size. This closes the loop of the entire system. Throughout the Amazon, survival depends less on strength than on precision. Seeing where you place your hands, moving deliberately, respecting boundaries you did not build. The bullet ant embodies this principle with ruthless clarity. The nerve blackout it creates is behavioral, not biological shutdown. The body still works. The brain still functions. But the ability to execute controlled action dissolves under pain so intense it overwhelms all other inputs. And once control is gone, the rainforest does not need to attack you. It only needs to be what it already is. Roots remain hard. Slopes remain slick. Rivers remain unforgiving. In this environment, control is survival. Lose it, even briefly, and everything else starts moving against you. The forest floor looks quiet in the way only a rainforest can, dense, layered, alive, yet deceptively still. Leaf litter overlaps in damp mosaics, broken by fallen twigs, seed pods, and the faint shimmer of moisture trapped beneath the canopy. Nothing here announces danger loudly. The most consequential threats often arrive without sound, without force, without spectacle. The coral snake moves through this space as if it belongs nowhere and everywhere at once, its bands of red, black and yellow slipping between leaves with a precision that feels almost mechanical. It does not chase. It does not posture. It does not waste energy. Its survival strategy is patience paired with chemistry, and its bite is not designed to be dramatic. It is designed to be overlooked. The first contact rarely feels like an attack. Coral snakes have small fixed fangs and a restrained delivery system compared to larger vipers. A defensive nip can register as nothing more than a pinprick, easily mistaken for a thorn, an ant, or a sharp fragment of bark. There is no tearing, no sudden pain spike, no immediate feedback that something has gone wrong. In the ecosystem where this snake evolved, that subtlety is not a flaw, it is the entire point. Coral snakes feed primarily on other snakes and elongated prey, animals whose nervous systems must be shut down efficiently rather than overwhelmed by tissue destruction. The venom reflects this ecological niche. It is neurotoxic, not necrotic, and it is optimized to interfere with communication rather than cause immediate injury. As minutes pass, the forest continues as if nothing has changed. Insects click and buzz, humidity clings to skin, light filters through overlapping leaves in broken shafts. Inside the body, however, a different environment is beginning to shift. Coral snake venom does not attack muscles directly, and it does not destroy nerves. Instead, it targets the synapse, the microscopic junction where nerves pass signals to muscles. At these junctions, chemical messengers are released to tell muscle fibers when to contract. The venom interferes with this process, binding to receptors and blocking the signal's ability to cross. The nerve fires. The message is sent, but the muscle never receives it. This is what makes the progression so disorienting. There is no clear line between fine and not fine. Early effects can feel vague, even unreal. An odd heaviness in the limbs, a sense that movements require more effort than they should. Fingers may feel clumsy, as though gloves have been slipped on without notice. Speech can soften or slur slightly, not because the brain is impaired, but because the muscles of the tongue and jaw are no longer responding with their usual precision. To the person experiencing it, the disconnect is subtle enough to invite denial. The mind remains alert. Sensation remains intact. Pain is minimal or absent. The body simply begins to feel delayed. In the wild, this delay is lethal, not because it incapacitates instantly, but because it erodes urgency. Coral snake venom does not trigger the alarm bells humans associate with danger. There is no burning agony to force immediate action, no dramatic swelling to signal a crisis. Instead, the venom works along the same timescale as human doubt. People wait. They walk. They tell themselves they are tired, dehydrated, imagining it. Meanwhile, the neurotoxin continues to occupy more synaptic receptors, quietly expanding its influence. Breathing is where the illusion finally breaks. Respiration relies on a coordinated series of muscle contractions, from the diaphragm to the intercostal muscles between the ribs. These muscles do not stop working all at once. They weaken unevenly, producing a sensation that is hard to interpret. Air still moves in and out, but each breath feels slightly less effective than the last. The chest may feel heavy, as though something is resting on it, not crushing but weighing it down. This is the true meaning of blackout in neurotoxic envenomation. Not a loss of consciousness, but a failure of execution. The brain remains awake and aware while the body becomes increasingly unable to obey. From an ecological perspective, this mechanism makes perfect sense. Coral snakes are not built to overpower large, struggling prey. They rely on venom to immobilize animals that might otherwise injure them in close quarters. A slow but decisive shutdown of motor function prevents escape and reduces the risk of retaliation. In the forest, where energy efficiency is survival, a venom that works cleanly and predictably is more valuable than one that causes chaos. The coral snake's bright coloration reinforces this strategy. Its bands advertise danger openly, discouraging many predators from ever making contact. The venom is reserved for the moments when warning fails. Yet this same evolutionary elegance becomes a trap for humans. Bright colors are noticed, but not always understood. Myths and rhymes about band order circulate widely, some accurate, many not, and all unreliable under field conditions where lighting, mud, and partial views distort perception. Even when identification is correct, familiarity can breed complacency. The coral snake's reputation for being shy or non-aggressive is technically true, but irrelevant once contact has occurred. Venom chemistry does not negotiate based on intent. The most dangerous aspect of coral snake envenomation is not speed, but silence. Symptoms can take hours to fully manifest, especially with smaller venom doses. During that window, people move, exert themselves, elevate heart rate, and unknowingly accelerate venom distribution through the lymphatic system. The forest does not intervene. There is no sudden environmental shift to mirror the internal collapse. Birds continue calling. Leaves continue dripping. The ecosystem remains indifferent to individual physiology, just as it always has. In advanced stages, muscle weakness becomes unmistakable. Limbs may fail to lift against gravity. Coordination breaks down completely. Swallowing becomes difficult as throat muscles lose tone, increasing the risk of aspiration. At this point, the danger is no longer theoretical. Without medical intervention, specifically respiratory support and antivenom, the body can reach a state where oxygen deprivation becomes the limiting factor. Importantly, this is not because the lungs are damaged or the brain has shut down, but because the mechanical act of breathing can no longer be sustained. Understanding this mechanism reframes how coral snakes should be perceived. They are not relics of danger, nor are they exaggerated villains. They are precise instruments shaped by millions of years of selective pressure, occupying a narrow but effective role in the ecosystem. Their venom is not meant to terrify, it is meant to function. And it does, with a consistency that becomes lethal only when misunderstood. The lesson embedded in this progression is not simply avoid the bite. It is a warning about delayed consequences in environments where signals are subtle and margins are thin. In ecosystems like the rainforest, many hazards do not announce themselves dramatically. They unfold slowly, quietly, and with biological logic that does not align with human intuition. The coral snake embodies this perfectly. Its danger is not in the moment of contact, but in the hours that follow, when the body feels almost normal, until it suddenly, decisively, is not. Delay kills because it allows the venom to finish its work uninterrupted. The forest does not rush you. The symptoms do not scream. The blackout arrives not as darkness, but as silence between nerve and muscle, a conversation cut mid-sentence. By the time the body demands urgency, the window for easy intervention has already narrowed. And in that narrowing space, the coral snake's evolutionary advantage becomes painfully clear. Survival does not always belong to the strongest signal, but to the quietest one that is ignored for too long. The rainforest does not end at the tree line. It leaks outward into plantations, storage sheds, river docks, and the quiet corners where human order softens into clutter. Boots left overnight, clothes folded on a bench, banana bunches stacked in shade, still warm from the day's heat. These are not intrusions into the spider's world so much as extensions of it, places where darkness, humidity, and insect traffic recreate the same conditions found beneath leaf litter or fallen logs. The Brazilian wandering spider thrives in these in-between spaces, not because it seeks people, but because it follows opportunity wherever the forest's rules continue to apply. Unlike web-bound spiders that anchor themselves to fixed geometry, this animal lives in motion. It hunts by roaming, its long legs lifting its body high off the ground, sensory hairs tasting vibrations with every step. At night, when temperatures stabilize and insect activity peaks, it patrols like a moving trap. By day, it needs shelter that holds moisture and blocks light. A boot is perfect. A folded shirt is better. A banana cluster is ideal, dense, warm, full of insect life, and rarely disturbed until human hands arrive suddenly, without warning. The strike happens in the space between expectation and contact. A hand closes around fabric. A foot slides into leather. The spider, compressed against a surface it cannot escape through, does not flee. It escalates. The Brazilian wandering spider's defensive display is unmistakable. Forelegs raised, body angled forward, fangs exposed. It is a warning shaped by evolution, a last signal meant to halt the threat before venom is spent. When that signal is ignored, when pressure continues, when the space collapses, the bite is fast, direct, and decisive. There is no delay in the chemistry that follows. Unlike venoms that work locally or gradually, the wandering spider's venom is engineered for speed. It is a complex cocktail of neuroactive peptides that act on ion channels throughout the nervous system, forcing them into prolonged activation. Sodium channels remain open longer than they should. Calcium floods synapses. Neurotransmitters are released in excess. The result is not paralysis in the traditional sense, but overload. The nervous system does not shut down. It panics. This panic is physiological, not psychological, though it feels like both. Within minutes, the body enters a state of runaway signaling. Sweat breaks out across the skin as autonomic nerves misfire. Muscles begin to tremble, not from weakness, but from conflicting commands arriving faster than they can be processed. Heart rate accelerates. Blood pressure fluctuates unpredictably. Dizziness sets in as vascular tone shifts and the brain struggles to regulate its own blood supply. To the person experiencing it, the sensation is deeply unsettling because it feels like loss of control from the inside out. The mind is alert, but the body behaves as if it has been hijacked. From an ecological standpoint, this makes brutal sense. The Brazilian wandering spider often targets fast, struggling prey, large insects, small vertebrates, animals capable of biting back. A venom that induces immediate systemic chaos reduces the chance of retaliation. By overwhelming the prey's coordination and reflexes, the spider buys itself safety. This is not venom designed to wait. It is venom designed to dominate the moment. The human body, however, responds poorly to this strategy. Our instinctive reaction to sudden internal distress is movement. We stand up. We run. We try to walk it off. In the context of wandering spider envenomation, this is the worst possible choice. Physical exertion accelerates circulation and lymphatic flow, distributing venom more rapidly throughout the body. Hyperventilation compounds the problem. Rapid breathing alters blood chemistry, lowering carbon dioxide levels and increasing neuronal excitability. Exactly the opposite of what a nervous system already in overdrive needs. As breathing quickens, the sense of panic intensifies, creating a feedback loop that feels impossible to interrupt. The body interprets its own symptoms as a threat signal and responds by amplifying them. Sweating becomes profuse. Tremors spread from hands to arms to legs. Fine motor control deteriorates. Balance falters. This is not because consciousness is fading, but because signal fidelity is collapsing. Too many messages arriving too fast with no hierarchy. One of the more unsettling aspects of wandering spider venom is how clearly it reveals the architecture of the nervous system through failure. The autonomic system, the part responsible for heart rate, sweating, digestion, and vascular control, becomes hyperactive. Meanwhile, voluntary motor control becomes unreliable. The body feels both overstimulated and strangely unresponsive at the same time. This paradox is a hallmark of systemic neurotoxic surge, and it is why the experience feels so unreal. People often describe a sense of detachment, as though they are observing their own body malfunction from a slight distance. In severe cases, the effects escalate further. Muscle rigidity can alternate with weakness. Visual disturbances may appear as blood flow regulation falters. Nausea and vomiting reflect the autonomic system's inability to coordinate digestion under stress. In untreated cases, respiratory muscles can be affected indirectly, not through paralysis, but through exhaustion and misfiring. The body works harder and harder to maintain basic functions until efficiency collapses. It is important to understand that the Brazilian wandering spider is not aggressive in the way that term is often used. Its behavior is defensive, context-dependent, and shaped by the environments it occupies. It wanders because wandering is how it eats. It hides where darkness and humidity persist. It strikes when escape is cut off. The danger arises not from malice, but from overlap. Two species following different rules into the same space. In the forest, this overlap is rare. Most animals that encounter the spider do so on its terms, with room to retreat. In human-modified environments, the geometry changes. Confined spaces turn defensive displays into forced encounters. Clothing and tools become traps rather than barriers. The spider's evolutionary solutions, perfectly tuned for rainforest chaos, collide with human habits built for predictability. Survival in this scenario hinges on breaking the wrong move chain early. Remaining still slows venom spread. Controlled breathing stabilizes blood chemistry. Reducing movement gives the nervous system time to cope rather than spiral. These are not intuitive responses, which is why education matters. The wandering spider does not rely on stealth alone. It relies on the body's tendency to betray itself under sudden stress. Seen through a wider lens, this animal is a reminder that speed is not always about pursuit. Sometimes it is about chemistry outrunning reason. The Brazilian wandering spider compresses the timeline between contact and consequence, turning minutes into a critical window. In that window, the forest's logic is unforgiving. Panic feeds poison. Motion magnifies damage. The system collapses not because it is weak, but because it is pushed beyond its design limits too quickly to adapt. The spider, meanwhile, retreats. It does not linger. Its role in the ecosystem is complete the moment the threat disengages. Insects resume their movements. The night continues. The forest absorbs the disturbance without pause. What remains is a lesson written in physiology rather than wounds. That in environments shaped by speed, survival belongs not to those who react fastest, but to those who understand when stillness is the only move left. At the edges of the rainforest, where human order thins and organic chaos reasserts itself, the black widow does not announce its presence. It does not need to. It occupies the margins, under logs, inside abandoned burrows, beneath loose bark, within tangled debris where insects funnel through narrow corridors. These are not dramatic hunting grounds, but efficient ones. The web is irregular, sticky, and low to the ground, designed less for beauty than for interception. In these spaces, vibration is information, and the black widow reads it with absolute precision. The bite itself is often anticlimactic. A brief sting, a momentary awareness that something sharp made contact. Many people dismiss it immediately, especially in environments already full of scratches, bites, thorns, and irritations. The spider does not chase. It does not cling. It releases and retreats, relying on venom rather than persistence. That venom, however, is engineered to turn the body against itself, not through destruction, but through excess. Black widow venom works by forcing the nervous system into a state of relentless activation. At the cellular level, it triggers massive neurotransmitter release at nerve endings, particularly acetylcholine and other signaling chemicals responsible for muscle contraction and autonomic regulation. Muscles are told to contract again and again, without pause, without coordination. There is no graceful failure here. There is no quiet shutdown. What follows is tension without relief. The first sensation is often described as wrong rather than painful, a deep internal discomfort that does not align with any familiar injury. Muscles begin to tighten involuntarily, starting near the bite and spreading outward. The abdomen may seize first, creating cramps that feel visceral and alarming, as though something inside has knotted itself and refuses to let go. From there, the tension radiates into the back, shoulders, chest, and limbs. These are not fleeting spasms. They arrive in waves, each contraction stacking on the last, disrupting posture, balance, and the simplest acts of movement. This is where the body-off sensation takes hold. Coordination deteriorates, not because muscles are weak, but because they are locked in conflict, some fibers contracting while others resist, all driven by an overstimulated nervous system that cannot reset. Fine motor control vanishes early. Hands may curl or tremble uncontrollably. Jaw muscles tighten. Facial expressions freeze into strained masks that reflect the internal struggle rather than emotion. Pain becomes diffuse, moving, unpredictable. It does not peak and resolve. It persists. Sleep, under these conditions, is not rest. It is an illusion. The body cannot downshift while neural signals continue firing at full intensity. Even when exhaustion sets in, muscles jerk and seize, pulling the nervous system back into wakefulness. People drift, surface, drift again, never completing the cycles that restore hydration, electrolyte balance, and hormonal stability. Sweating increases, driven by autonomic overstimulation. Fluids are lost faster than they are replaced. Dehydration begins quietly, compounding the cramps by altering muscle chemistry and nerve conductivity. Stress amplifies everything. Pain elevates heart rate. Elevated heart rate increases metabolic demand. Increased demand deepens dehydration. This spiral is not dramatic in its onset, but it is relentless in its progression. The venom does not escalate. The body does. By responding to overstimulation with more stimulation, tension, anxiety, movement, it worsens its own condition. What might be clinically manageable in a controlled environment becomes increasingly dangerous when feedback loops are allowed to run unchecked. In the Amazon, this distinction matters profoundly. Distance transforms physiology. A bite that might result in hours of monitored discomfort near medical infrastructure becomes a logistical emergency when rivers replace roads and travel times stretch into days. Pain alone can immobilize. Abdominal cramps strong enough to force a person into a fetal position make walking, paddling, or climbing nearly impossible. Vomiting and sweating accelerate fluid loss in an environment where clean water may not be immediately accessible. Heat and humidity interfere with thermoregulation, pushing already stressed systems closer to failure. The black widow does not target humans, and its venom was never shaped to kill large mammals. Its ecological role is surgical. By inducing rapid, sustained muscle contraction, it subdues prey efficiently and deters predators that learn quickly to avoid its distinctive silhouette. The red markings on its abdomen are not decoration, they are signals, honed by generations of selection, advertising consequences without requiring engagement. Most animals heed that warning. Humans, often unaware or distracted, do not. What makes black widow envenomation especially insidious in remote ecosystems is the mismatch between perception and reality. The spider is small. The bite mark is often subtle. There is no dramatic swelling, no tissue death, no obvious external injury to anchor concern. The danger unfolds internally over hours through processes invisible to the eye. By the time the seriousness is clear, mobility may already be compromised. Muscle cramps do more than cause pain. They interfere with basic survival tasks. Carrying equipment becomes impossible when forearms lock. Maintaining posture fails when core muscles seize. Even breathing can feel labored as intercostal muscles tighten, not enough to stop respiration, but enough to make every breath feel resisted, effortful. The body is not suffocating. It is fighting itself. Insects continue their routines around the web. The forest remains indifferent. This is not a predator-prey drama played out in visible motion, but a biochemical exchange whose consequences extend far beyond the moment of contact. The spider's involvement ends almost immediately. The human experience is just beginning. From an evolutionary perspective, this mechanism is brutally efficient. Overstimulation is faster than paralysis and more versatile than tissue damage. It creates confusion, incapacity, and deterrence all at once. For a small sedentary predator, this is an elegant solution. For a large organism dependent on coordinated movement and hydration, it is a cascading problem. The Amazon amplifies cascades. Heat increases metabolic rate, intensifying muscle contractions. Humidity interferes with evaporative cooling, making sweating less effective while still draining fluids. Nightfall complicates navigation and rescue. Wildlife, terrain, and weather introduce additional stressors that further tax a nervous system already stretched thin. Understanding this context reframes the black widow's reputation. It is not a creature of myth or exaggeration. It is a specialist operating within a narrow ecological niche, whose venom reveals how fragile coordination becomes when neural balance is disrupted. The danger is not sudden death, but sustained dysfunction, hours or days of pain, dehydration, and physiological strain that can tip into true emergency when isolation removes margins for error. The forest does not reward endurance born of denial. It rewards decisions made early, when movement is still possible and systems are still responsive. In remote environments, the line between manageable and life-threatening is drawn not by venom potency alone, but by distance, delay, and the compounding effects of stress. The black widow's lesson is quiet and severe. Loss of function does not always arrive as collapse. Sometimes it comes as tightening, cramping, sleeplessness, and thirst, signals easy to underestimate until the body can no longer compensate. In that slow realization, as muscles refuse to release and coordination slips away, the spider's evolutionary success becomes unmistakable. It does not need to overpower. It only needs to push the system just far enough that the environment finishes the work. The water looks calm in the way only blackwater rivers do. Dark, reflective, slow-moving, almost gentle. Tannins stain the surface the color of steeped tea, swallowing depth and distance until the river feels shallower than it truly is. Light penetrates only a short way before dissolving into brown shadow. In this environment, vision is unreliable, sound is distorted, and movement becomes the dominant language. It is here, in water, that hides more than it reveals, that the electric eel turns the nervous system itself into terrain. The eel is not a serpent, despite its shape. It is a fish, adapted not for speed or teeth-driven pursuit, but for control at a distance. Its body houses rows of specialized cells, electrocytes, stacked like biological batteries along most of its length. Individually, these cells produce only a small electrical potential. Together, synchronized with millisecond precision, they generate discharges powerful enough to overwhelm the neuromuscular systems of animals far larger than the eel itself. This is not a weapon of injury. It is a switch. The first shock does not feel like pain in the conventional sense. It feels like interruption. Muscles seize not because they are damaged, but because they are commanded to contract all at once. Voluntary control vanishes instantly. The brain continues to issue instructions, but the signal path is hijacked, overridden by an external current that forces motor neurons to fire simultaneously. The effect is total and immediate. Arms lock. Legs stiffen. The body becomes rigid, no longer responsive to intention. In water, this loss of control is catastrophic. Swimming depends on continuous, coordinated muscle activity, small adjustments, rhythmic contractions, constant feedback between balance, breath, and movement. The eel's discharge collapses that system in a single pulse. A person struck while wading or swimming does not sink gracefully. They spasm, inhale reflexively, and lose posture all at once. The body's natural response to sudden muscular contraction often includes an involuntary gasp. Underwater, that gasp pulls water into the airway, transforming a neurological event into a respiratory emergency within seconds. This is the true danger of electric eels, not electrocution, not burns, not cardiac arrest, but forced helplessness at the worst possible moment. The eel does not need to hold its prey or repeat its attack continuously. One well-timed discharge can create a window where gravity, water, and panic do the rest. In shallow floodplains, where footing is unstable and visibility poor, even a brief loss of muscle control can send a person face first into mud or submerged roots, unable to recover before oxygen deprivation begins. From the eel's perspective, this mechanism is exquisitely tuned to its environment. Blackwater rivers are cluttered with obstacles, branches, submerged vegetation, uneven substrates. Chasing prey through this maze would be inefficient and risky. Instead, the eel turns the environment into an amplifier. A stunned fish floats or sinks, immobilized long enough for the eel to approach and swallow it whole. The eel does not waste energy on struggle. It removes choice. What makes this strategy particularly dangerous for humans is its remoteness. Unlike venom or teeth, the eel's weapon does not require contact. A discharge can propagate through water, reaching targets without warning. In turbid conditions, there may be no visual cue at all. The eel itself may remain unseen, its presence detectable only by the sudden failure of the body to respond. The panic trap begins immediately after the first shock. As muscle control returns, often within seconds, the mind floods with alarm. People thrash, kick, try to stand, try to breathe all at once. This frantic movement increases instability, stirs sediment, and worsens disorientation. If the eel discharges again, the second shock often arrives while the body is already compromised, lungs partially filled with water, footing uncertain, heart rate elevated. Each additional pulse compounds the risk, not by adding damage, but by extending the window of helplessness. Electric eels are capable of modulating their output. They use low-voltage discharges to sense their surroundings, detecting prey through distortions in the electrical field. High-voltage shocks are reserved for moments of capture or defense. This means the eel often knows where its target is before the target knows the eel exists. In flooded forests, where fish, mammals and humans all share narrow channels and shallow pools, this sensory advantage is decisive. The Amazon's seasonal rhythms intensify this danger. During the wet season, rivers spill into forests, creating vast networks of temporary waterways. Fish disperse. Terrestrial animals are forced to wade or swim. Humans navigating these flooded landscapes often rely on familiarity rather than visibility, stepping into water that looks passable but conceals drop-offs, tangled roots, or sudden depth changes. In these conditions, balance is already precarious. The eel's shock does not create danger, it exposes it. Breathing, normally automatic and resilient, becomes fragile when control is lost. A sudden inhalation underwater triggers coughing and choking once airways clear, but that recovery requires posture and coordination. If the body is rigid or convulsing, clearing the airway becomes difficult or impossible. Even brief submersion can escalate into aspiration, compounding the physiological stress long after the electrical event has passed. Unlike venom, which continues acting after delivery, the eel's effect is transient. This fleeting nature can be misleading. People underestimate events that do not leave visible marks. There is no swelling, no bleeding, no lingering numbness to signal injury. The danger lies in the timing, not the aftermath. A shock delivered at the wrong moment, mid-step, mid-breath, mid-crossing, can cascade into drowning, even though the electrical effect itself has already ended. The eel's evolutionary success lies in this precision. It does not need sustained force. It needs synchronization. By aligning its discharge with the physics of water and the biology of muscle contraction, it turns prey size and strength into irrelevant variables. A large animal is no safer than a small one when both lose control simultaneously. In human narratives, electric eels are often portrayed as curiosities, biological oddities with exaggerated reputations. In reality, they are specialists operating at the intersection of neurobiology and environment. Their presence reshapes how movement and risk must be understood in blackwater systems. The river is not just a physical space, it is an electrical one, where conductivity turns distance into vulnerability. The Amazon does not offer stable footing as a default. It offers temporary balance, constantly renegotiated with every step. In this context, anything that interrupts coordination, even briefly, carries outsized consequences. The eel does not need to attack repeatedly or pursue aggressively. It only needs to remove agency for a moment and let the environment finish the equation. The lesson here is not fear of the animal, but respect for the mechanism. Electric eels do not hunt humans. They defend space, capture prey, and navigate a world where electricity is as natural a tool as teeth or claws. The danger arises when human movement intersects that system without understanding its rules. In blackwater rivers, control is survival. Lose it, even briefly, and the margin disappears. The electric eel embodies this reality with ruthless efficiency. Its shock is not an ending. It is a pause, a forced silence between intention and action. In water, that pause is all it takes for panic, gravity and breath to align against you. And by the time muscles obey again, the river may already have claimed the advantage.